Yeah, good afternoon, all of you. This is Andre Marco. I'm the director of the European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition. Today's session is ETS revision for phase 4, the EU ETS under trilogue. This is a public event. It's not under Chatham House rules. So we are now waiting for a few minutes for people to stream in. There are quite a few people registered, and we need to learn to wait for 3 or 4 minutes until everybody streams in. Should have started a little bit earlier, but this is the way it is. Now, it is a testimony to the fact that even in these difficult times, in times of crisis that are not necessarily directly related to the ETS, there's still a very strong interest in the revision and the evolution of the ETS, which will continue to be a flagship of European climate change policy. There are many other instruments that work with ETS, but ETS and the price signal is a very visible component of European climate change policy. To some degree, it is what the EU climate change policy has become known around the world. Today, we are reaching towards the end of the process. It's been a long process, and we have all been involved, some of us for more years than others, but we've all been involved in from the start of the proposal of by the European Commission to the Council and the European Parliament debates, and what we're ended up in the trilogues, which things are getting a little bit less public, but nevertheless very intense. Also, with other elements of the Fit for 55, also to some degree, and I'm referring especially to the CBAM, also very much dependent on the resolutions of the EU ETS. In the end, the CBAM is a companion to the ETS, so having one out without the other probably makes no sense. Today's session will start with an initial intervention from Jan Tuma. Jan, welcome. And Czech presidency, we know that presidency always plays a very balanced role. So I know that you'll be cautious, but nevertheless, I think people will be anxious to hear what your views are. And after that, we try to provide a balanced approach to different views. There will be different stakeholders. We are the European Roundtable on Climate Change, and being a roundtable, we try to provide a balance. So Domien van Genechten, currently of E3G, formerly of ERCST, is with you. I'm not sure whether you're in Brussels or Berlin. I'm not sure where you are, but I think you're in Berlin, probably, Domien.
Correct.
Then Liv Ratte. For those of you that have been on another planet, you will know that have not been on another planet should know that Liv is a Norsk Hydro, aluminum and energy producer from Norway, a global corporation. Michael Palle, a participant and a contributor to the intellectual debate from Potsdam Institute on the ETS and other files. So welcome, Michael. Good to see you here. Nadia Vink from Euralliage, European Association for Energy, one of the energy-intensive industries. And last but not least, Wanda Buk from PGE, the Polish power company. Wanda has advised us that she said 7 minutes late. I'm not sure, we will count 7 minutes, but that's what she said, and that's what I'm repeating here. So for the moment, what I will ask, I'm looking at my time is 16:05. I think it's fair enough to get started. So Jan, I will ask you first to give your views at this stage of the trilogue. Again, you have until the end of the year to untangle this whole thing. I think people are waiting quite anxiously, hoping that they can go for Christmas and not have to worry about about trilogues and ETS anymore, at least not in this not in this format. So Jan, I'll give you the floor first, and then we'll go to the reaction from the panelists.
Thank you, Andre, and hello everyone. Indeed, that will be nice Christmas. We all wish for. Yes, I would like to ask for understanding that as a presidency, I have to be rather diplomatic in my statements, and I cannot comment on the ongoing discussions in detail that you would probably like to hear or signal any my preferences or preferences of the Czech Republic, because we are honest broker and we are trying to negotiate the trialogues to the interests of the council and according to the general approach. So naturally, we are defending the general approach in the trialogues, and so far we've been explaining positions of the institutions, and we were looking for low-hanging fruits. In some rare occasions, rare cases where we already found some agreement, and however, there is several clusters of topics which are very political, as you can imagine, and we need political guidance in those. This is much needed in order to move forward and to discuss those topics in detail on technical level. So we hope that the pace of the negotiation will speed up as of the next trialogue in November. That doesn't mean that we would be doing nothing so far, because we have two meetings a week, just on ETS and social climate fund and aviation and all these and maritime and all these clusters. So hopefully the next trialogue in November on 10th of November will bring some more guidance on a political level, and which we could then use on a technical level. This is true for the overall ambition, free allocation cluster, financial measures on innovation fund, modernization fund, and auctioning revenues, maritime cluster, which is a bit anecdotic that Czech Republic is negotiating the trialogue, and the maritime cluster being a landlocked country, but we empathize with other member states, so we are still doing our best to defend the general approach. And then it is, of course, the BRT or ETS2 and social climate fund. The BRT or ETS2 is for sure one of the most sensitive topics, as it was the case both in the European Parliament and in the Council. So I can't really guess on how the final compromise could look like, but we will do our best to find it in a way that will be implementable. That's quite important, which will lead to emission reduction and which will be socially sensitive and protective for vulnerable citizens. I think we agree with the European Parliament on the principles which leads the way during the negotiations in individual clusters, and we are trying to strike the right balance. The European Commission has been very helpful and constructive. They provide us with insight, with calculations, and quick assessment of what will individual proposals mean, and with which impact, which is very useful for the technical discussions. And they also try to come up with some drafting and possible compromises which is also very helpful. But of course, on the political topics, the political guidance is needed, and that's what we need the agreement in trilogue for. There were some ideas or demand for agreement to be presented at COP in Egypt, but I don't think that is viable. But the agreement by the end of 2022 is still possible if the political topics can be resolved. We are determined to work hard on those if we get the political guidance, and I still think it's doable. After all, it's nothing unusual that the start of almost any process is slow, but most of the work is done in the last days. That was the case also for achieving the general approach in the council. So let's hope we will reach a final agreement with the parliament on this one as well. Okay, so that's it for me for now.
All right, Jan. I think you probably will expect that there will be, nevertheless, people kind of trying to find a chink in the armor and find an angle to get you to say something that will give them a direction. Otherwise, it's an intellectual game, and I'm sure people will try that. So thank you very much and welcome, Wanda. Good to see you. Let's now move on in the order that we have on this list. So Domin van Genechnen from E3G.
Thanks, Andre. Pleasure to be here, and thanks a lot, Jan, for for outlining the process and what is going on while still having to be diplomatic. I guess we have the liberty that we don't have to be diplomatic, so we can ask some more questions and make some more statements on the content that is being discussed, at least how we are hearing it from an outsider perspective. So I think you alluded to the fact that things are going slow and that a lot of political guidance is needed from the political level. We also know that in the last two political trilogues, not a lot of movement was made beyond just on the low-hanging fruits. It is, I think, somewhat telling that, from my understanding at least, those low-hanging fruits are related to cost compensation and carbon leakage measures for industry. So there has been some, to my understanding at least, some political agreement around benchmarks, especially for the steel sector, as well as around indirect cost compensation, which really speaks to the fact that the trilogues for the emissions trading system, which is a decarbonization tool, which is set out to make the rules for the next 10 years, is really focused on protecting against costs, especially in the short term, which tells me that it is impacted quite a lot by the current energy price crisis, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, etc. To some extent, that is understandable. A lot of businesses are in a difficult situation. But I would also like to, stress the fact that these rules are supposed to be made for the coming decades. So they shouldn't be dominated by short-term impacts, but really think about the longer-term decarbonization goals. Which brings me to my second point. And as a climate NGO or climate think tank, it is disappointing to hear that basically ambition and a discussion on ambition is not being discussed right now. We know that the differences in the 2030 targets the 2030 ambition between the Parliament and the Council was slim. But things have also happened, and a lot has happened since the Commission's proposal. We are seeing more ambition on the ground in terms of renewables, in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of targets for both of those, and in terms of actual investments happening. And I do want to point towards the fact that it is interesting that it is not reflected at all within the emissions trading system and the discussions therein. I mean, we all know that renewable energy targets, energy efficiency targets have a direct impact on emissions under the ETS, which could lead to surpluses in the future. So it is at least interesting that that's not happening, and also disappointing from our perspective. I was hoping to react to a few things that Jan was going to say, but he didn't give me too much to feed into. I just, maybe as opening statement, I'll make like 2 short statements and then leave the rest for discussion. Obviously, at E3G, I work on industry decarbonization, so I have less to say about ETS2 or ETS BRT. But I think as a core fundamental principle here, especially as we're talking so much about protecting industry, protecting companies, that a very strong social climate fund is paramount to have any agreement on ETS2. It is also quite striking that the numbers or the figures we're talking about are of very different proportions. I think if we compare carbon leakage protection or free allocation with the sum that we're discussing in the social climate fund is about a quarter of free allocation value of the coming decades, which I think does tell something about how we're trying to protect citizens versus how we're trying to protect companies and heavy industry, which I'm not saying one needs to be smaller or the other one needs to be bigger, just want to point towards the difference in both. And then a last point, not that you mentioned it, Jan, but it was part of the agenda, which is about the ETS being used to finance REPowerEU. I think it's quite interesting development where the ETS is more explicitly recognized as a revenue raising tool. But it seems to be going a bit too much in the wrong direction, where increasingly more it looks like the ETS is being treated as a cash cow, where we can, put our pockets in or delve into our pockets where we need a bit of funding to do climate stuff or to do other stuff. I think first and foremost, it is a climate policy tool. It's meant to reduce emissions, and secondary, it makes revenues. And you could have a debate, and we're having a debate in institutions as well, on what to do with those revenues. And I very much appreciate the signaling, especially from the Commission and the Parliament, that those revenues should go towards climate and energy spending in line with climate neutrality. But what we should watch out for is that we become too dependent on those revenues. If you become dependent on a revenue stream, it becomes, and I see Michael smiling, if you become dependent on those revenue streams, it becomes very difficult to see them decline, which might hamper ambition in the future. So that's one warning, I guess. But I do see, I do see the bright side in sort of Europeanizing some of those revenues for a crisis moment. I mean, even though REPowerEU is meant to finance, to some extent, short-term fossil fuel infrastructure investments, which we obviously disagree with, it is quite interesting that the ETS is being used as a crisis response mechanism with solidarity embedded in it. And that is something I think we can explore further as well, not as a crisis response tool, but maybe increase that part of the ETS as a what's the word I'm looking for, as a core part or core element of the revision. I'll leave it there and looking forward to discussion. Andre, I think you're muted.
I think you're right. A lot of questions that popped to mind, but first I think that we should go through the whole range of panels and we can come back. Liv?
Thank you, Andre, for inviting me to speak here today. And I would like to start with some facts. As Andre said, I come from the aluminium industry, and we are the largest aluminium producer in Europe. And the fact is that since October last year and until now, 50% of primary aluminium capacity has been shut down, meaning 1.1 million tons has been is out of Europe production. At the same time, Europe has been importing additional 1.2 million tons, where production has come up, booming up new production in countries like China, India, the Middle East, and Indonesia. And they have a much higher carbon footprint than the average is for European producers. This has led to, the closure has led to an additional CO2 emissions due to the EU footprint of 10.4 million. This is critical because we are in a time where Europe needs to have industries, and particular industries with a low carbon footprint. The average in Europe is 6.7 ton CO2 per ton produced, whereas in the world it's 16.7. My company, Norsk Hydro, are able to deliver aluminium today at 4 ton per ton produced, and our goal by 2030 is 2 ton. But we have now shut down production. And in the financial crisis, also 30% of capacity were lost in Europe, and it never came back. Sorry for having this long introduction, but I think it's very important to understand the critical situation that industries in Europe are facing at the moment. And we need these industries because it gives Europe income to protect citizens. It's make us more self-efficient. It creates jobs. And we are most advanced with regards to then decarbonizing the industries in the world. So with regards to the trilogue, I need to start with the CBAM. I know the CBAM is not part of the ETS. It is with regards to direct emission and direct free allocation. But for us as an industry, the untested CBAM is the largest threat in this trilogue, because the intention is good. It should be a carbon leakage protection mechanism as good as the one we have today, but none knows, it's untested. And for us, it's very important thereby to have a sort of safeguard and annual review mechanism to ensure that it is functioning according to its principle to be a carbon leakage mechanism. And if it's not functioning according to that, then it must be immediate correction and additional cost advantages that European industries are facing that must be compensated. Otherwise, we will see that review and this cost compensation coming in. It is a high risk for European industry. And then the indirect CO2 is also in the CBAM, you know, because of the marginal producer and the CO2 in the power price. We believe it should not be there until we see more renewables setting the price in the power sector in Europe. So it won't be that much threat anymore. And we foresee that to happen in the 2030s. So then it's not an issue anymore. And then the free allocation, do it gradually, be aware of what you're doing and have this review. And we propose then to look at the council proposal, which are more following this pattern in regards to starting gradual and then phasing it out last year, 2035. And then also the scope with regards to what sort of product or productions are also included in CBAM. It's important to include everything. Otherwise, we will see leakage. Like, for instance, now they have proposed not to have aluminium wheels in the CBAM. What does it mean? Well, aluminium wheels production in Europe will close down because they are facing the cost, whereas importers don't. And the same goes for scrap. And then also, we are the most carbon-friendly industries in the world. Protect us with regards to export. We need to find a solution for that. Okay, let me move on. Repowering Europe. Don't use the innovation fund. It's too little money for the industries already. So if you're going to use ETS for the purpose of the repowering of Europe, then we also suggest using and front-loading a part of the auction volume. And then with regard to benchmark improvement, fixing and producing aluminium with a much lower footprints. We have been looking at that for many, many years, and it's not a quick fix. And increasing then the annual rate of above 0.2 is only makes us having more OPEC, meaning that we are less able to decarbonize. So what's the purpose of that? Because then it might be we cannot afford to do it. And then there is also with regards to the benchmark in general, that they have a proposal then to have one benchmark for the aluminium industry, meaning that also recycling will be part of the primary aluminium benchmark. But recycling has only 1/3 of the emission that we have in primary, and we cannot recycle enough volume to supply for the demand in Europe. So we think that we should keep them as two separate. And we think that really the aluminium recycler should also have a separate benchmark, because recycling is a important part of this transformation. So protect those who are the future in Europe. And then with regards to CCS and DOCs, CCS is there today as a compliance instrument in ETS. Direct air capturing is not. Nobody can come to zero emission by using CCS. So you need to allow for direct air capturing to get to zero for existing plants. And let it be there also in the 20s. Fred Lisa is an ambassador for it. We support him with regards to that. And then with regards to additional requirement for getting free allocation, it shouldn't be there. It's tough enough to be in Europe these days. And if you do it, the only one could be that you require that all companies has a plan to decarbonize. That's fair. And I think all installation in Europe should develop such a plan. And then, as what Elisa say, we must avoid having too high prices in this tough period where Europe is going much more ambitious than other countries are doing. And then makes me then look at Article 29A. And the threshold with regards to when you are changing prices and having intervention in prices is too conservative today. We think it should be only 1.5 or 2. My dog is barking. Sorry for that in the background. For the 2 preceding years, because we need the flexibility now. And then we need to avoid the cross-sector correction factor. There are instruments for how to implement that. And also we support the rebasing, because it makes the budget for this whole period more stringent. And we don't need that, no. And that, I think I need to stop.
I think even the dog is barking. You see, I think
I get my dog.
I think your audience, your supporter is there in the background. But you know, the question we have, and we know all this we know because we've heard your arguments quite persuasive. But the question will be, where are we and where is the process right now, and how much of this is working. Michael, you know, I put you in the middle because I've got one advocate, one industry, one Michael Pale, another advocate, another 2 advocates. So I put you in the middle, a sandwich in the middle. You don't have a pony or a dog in this race. Let's put it this way.
So is this what you expect from me, Andre?
I don't expect you to bark, no.
I hope I can deliver. Anyway, thanks for the opportunity to add my 5 cents here. I'm going to be the opposite of cautious. Maybe that's what you expected. I've prepared a few slides, which I bring up now. And I think, I mean, one of the most interesting issues to discuss and talk about is what are really the contentious points here. So what should we look out, and particularly what are the issues that put the ETS at risk? I mean, both in terms of success and failure. And you offered a selection of issues in the form of these 3 questions, to which I very much agree. I would have selected the same issues. And before I dive into them, and I have 1 slide for each of them, I would like to offer my overall take. And I have personally come to the conclusion that the last 12 months, which of course were a time of intense and threatening crisis, have kind of previewed the future pressure points in the ETS. And I think, and I'm a bit concerned that what we are now seeing in the discussions and what have been prepared before the time of the crisis will not prompt the proper precaution in reaction. And I like to remind us all of Churchill, who has this famous saying that you should not let a crisis go to waste. And I personally think that we could have made more of this crisis, but of course, not as an excuse, but as a way of explaining it. All things that we are doing now and that we are changing in a fundamental way will, of course, be politically very risky. I think that's pretty much clear. So going into the issues, I first look at the role of non-compliance entities, and to remind us all what is the situation. The EU Parliament has proposed 2 amendments. One is a package of amendments that will practically exclude non-compliance entities from the markets, or the much more moderate version of that is to ask the Commission to prepare this impact assessment thereof, which is another amendment. And so my observation from afar is that I think that the direct exclusion is very unlikely. Many people are extremely concerned about this. Because it can have very drastic impacts on the market. But again, I think it's unlikely that we will see this materialize politically, because it's not supported by councils and because much of the heat has gone out of this debate by now, mainly because prices have gone down, and prices are the kind of heart rate in the political debate. And so everything is much calmer now. And I think that's helpful here. And economically and practically, in many ways, it's not a good idea for market function, especially, and this has been discussed at many events and exchanges. And I bring up just the 2 most important arguments from my point of view, namely that also compliance entities can speculate in the market, and that we would very likely see a substantial drain of liquidity, which would impair the market function substantially. And I think I understand the problems, but I think this cannot be in the interest of any involved party, actually. Yeah, so what do I expect in terms of the agreement of the negotiation? I think it will likely be toned down to have such an impact assessment, and this will come, and I think this will not be very high-flying in terms of political attention, and in a way that's good, but in another way that's bad, namely because I think if we solve in quotation marks the problem that way, we will miss out on some very important transparency recommendations that were provided by or given by ESMA in its final report earlier this year, and also by work that I did with my colleague Simon Kamel. And yeah, looking at transparency, this sounds like, okay, it's just transparency, but I think what is actually behind that is a much more thorough form of centralized market monitoring that will also solve some substantial information issues and maybe can install or generate a lot of trust. I'm not saying that trust has been lost in the market, but I think trust will become more and more important. And a key factor for enabling this trust, I think, is the provision of data where everyone can get access and understand what's happening in the market. I think this is important, and we are not here, and the market is changing substantially, but we are not keeping up in our capacity to understand what's driving these changes. And so I would like to remind everyone again, especially the people who are actively participating in the negotiation, not to forget about this and keep this up, because in the long term, it will be extremely important. Moving on to the use of the ETS revenue to finance REPowerEU, I already provided a first reaction by laughing at what Domine said. And I would like to approach this in 2 ways. So if you are a principled person and looked at this from a more principled point of view, you would say, oh my God, what's happening here? And I mean, the immediate reaction would be, this is a messing around. And depending on which proposal you're looking at, it's either messing around with integrity, it's messing around with future financial latitude, or the capacity, or I mean, the political costs of increasing prices in the future, or innovation. Yeah, I also want to caution here about not trying out the innovation fund, which would practically mean when you take all the money from the innovation fund. So some people have already commented that this would mean like changing the objective or changing the function from a market stability reserve to a money supply reserve. Of course, this is exaggerated, but there's some truth to it. And it could especially be a concern when it becomes part of a more permanent budget spending. This is not the idea of Repower EU, but we all know that there are temptations. Then if you are a pragmatic person and look at it from a pragmatic perspective, you would say extraordinary times, extraordinary measures. So, I mean, we have a big problem and we just need to solve it. So meaning that we need to get new money, we need to get it from somewhere. The lion's share of this money will come from the RFF, but we also need some additional money, and the decision has been made to take it from the ETS. So we need to get it from somewhere, and everything will be painful. And we also need to keep the EUA prices down and within a corridor that people think takes out the political pressure, at least the very high steam of this pressure part. And different stakeholders may have different opinions on what the comfort zone at this time would be. Peter Liese 2 weeks ago in the Carbon Forward conference mentioned a range of 50 to 100. Other people may have different opinions, but I think as a matter of fact, we are having an implicit price corridor now. And a price corridor that's intended to safeguard the ETS from dramatic changes. So what to make out of it? I have to say I'm sympathetic with the pragmatic perspective. I do not want to be the very principled person here, even though I think it's necessary not to forget the principles. But I'm asking myself, looking forward, how high is the probability that the rest of the decade will not be extraordinary? So, I mean, this is a very intense crisis, but do we think that it will be solved completely in 2 years from now, that it will be over, or that nothing else will be coming? I hope so, but I'm not sure. And I think this is previewing something that has been discussed repeatedly also in this context. I think one way or the other, it's time to rethink the governance, to ask some serious questions that we probably would not ask in normal times. So last but not least, the issue of the extension of the ETS to buildings and road sector. I think at some point, all of us were surprised that it actually came very close to a deal. I mean, when looking at the positions of Parliament, Council and Commission, they are not too far away from each other. I mean, which was quite surprising, given that many people thought the ETS was dead. So it's in the range of being politically feasible because also because of the late implementation. So it's only coming in 5 years or so, and it has some stringency holds. But okay, this is maybe again pragmatism. But as Domine already said, it all seems to hinge on the Social Climate Fund. And I'm not understanding. I've heard that Germany is among the countries pushing back rather strongly on that. I still have to understand why. If it's about the money, it's about being located or implemented as an EU fund and all these plans that come along with it. I'm struggling to understand this a bit, but I think this is something we have to really look out for and make this work in order to make the ETS2 work. Yeah, and what's also playing in here, I think, is what I perceive as an inverse financial relationship between the national energy crisis measures and the financial envelope of the Social Climate Fund. So we are seeing at the moment that there are drastic measures taken in response to the energy crisis. I think current numbers are about more than 500 billion euro within a time frame of 2 years. And this is rising and this is cutting into budgets. And at the same time, we're seeing financial pressure on the ETS. And I think this might not be directly related, but it's certainly indirectly related. It's also a matter of solidarity, and I think we somehow have to fix this because if you make the comparison, I mean, the numbers are just the ECF is so relatively small. It's still far away, but it's so important for the future, and I think this is something that has to be addressed. And solidarity must be more than a phrase here. And I'm really excited, but also concerned about how this will go. And I very much hope that there will be a solution, because this is so much at the centerpiece of all the reforms around the ETS, I think. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Nadia, I think that we heard from lived. Your alliage, many of your members are going through turbulent times and challenging times. Let's try and keep on what the reality is on the ground right now, because I think we're hearing a lot of people with a long wish list, but in the end, only certain things are in play. I don't know that everything is in play right now anymore. I think we're down to fewer things that we have to focus on. But Nadia and then Wanda.
Yeah, so maybe just to remind that I'm representing the silicon and ferroalloy industry. So we are key enabler for strategic supply chain. Silicon is used in photovoltaic panel, in electronic industry and so on. So I have to tell you that in September, we have made some survey, and the situation in our sector, like in other sector, is dramatic. This is the reality of the ground. This is not hypothetical. This is not assumption. This is not curves. It's the reality. 40% of the furnace have shut down. And since then, we have deplored an increase of shutting down. This is what it is today. That means also that there are hundreds of people, thousands of people having lost their job. This is also a reality, and not only underqualified, but also higher qualified people. We can see that with discussion with other sectors that, for instance, the zinc industry, they have curtailed 70% of the production. Fertilizer, it's 80%. We are in a dramatic situation. The house is burning. We have to, what is needed today is to manage an emergency situation and not embark into too much detailed discussion about the size of the chair in the house which is burning. What our sector and the other energy intensive industry needs is really to have measures to keep them surviving. We see that, as Liv has already said, that there is this major curtailment taking place in Europe. This is being replaced by imports of materials, product which with a higher carbon footprint, a significant higher carbon footprint. And if Europe wants to be more independent from key raw material, I'm sorry to say that it's exactly the opposite. This is happening on the field. Simply taking the example of silicon, which is a critical raw material, it is more important than ever, especially from China, where the production is made in a region where they only use coal for the source of energy, and in a region where it's the region of Xinjiang, where you have the Uyghur working in a very disputable social situation. So this is the situation today. And the industry really needs to have measure, drastic and in urgent way measure to stay in Europe and just to stay alive and be able to produce. When we see that, for instance, revenue from the ETS would be used to finance the repower EU, this is for us something which is not acceptable, because this measure will reduce the carbon leakage protection that we need more than ever. And on top of that, it could increase the risk of the cross-sectorial correction factor. This is the situation today. I will not repeat what Liv said, because we fully align with that. But this is really a plea to the decision makers to come back to the reality of the field. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask you all of you some questions at the end. Wanda, PGE is moving in very new directions and quite rapidly. But what are you faced with in this last 100 meters? It may not be November, but at some point we'll end up with the ETS and a new ETS. What's realistic to discuss?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sisti, for organizing this debate. And I'm touched with all of Nadia said, and going back to my interventions, I would like to cover briefly, as much as I can, 3 things. So first one is the carbon price volatility and the need to increase transparency on the EU ETS. The second one, the EU ETS reduction target and the MSR parameters. And last, but of course not least, modernization fund and free allowances dedicated for district heating, if we will have enough time. So starting with carbon price volatility, I think we can all agree that the price is an issue, but not the only issue. The second significant one is the volatility. The price swings over days or weeks and in some cases are as high as 47%. And this unpredictability also affects strongly long-term planning and investments which are necessary to deliver a European Green Deal. And in order to address the issue of the volatility, we should consider the proposals of the Parliament and the Council to amend the Article 29A, so it can react quicker to the price fluctuation. So when it comes to the proposal of the Parliament to lower the price multiplier that activates the mechanism after a twofold price increase, well, from our perspective, it's the step into the right direction, but we find that it should be lower even more. The predictability of the mechanism for market participants will be also better ensured by adapting the Council proposal for automatic release of these allowances. So, from our perspective, we should support those two proposals. Well, however, this is only the one instrument to enhance market predictability, and the other one is to limit the access for the financial institutions. And going back what you, Michael, said, I need to underline, well, from my perspective, well, I think you simplified a little bit, because the Parliament proposal is to limit the market access for the financial institutions that do not trade CO2 allowances on behalf of compliance entities with factual CO2 emissions. So it's not, and as I understood correctly, you just said financial institution as a whole. No, it's not. It's not the proposal. And it's significant. I will elaborate, and it's very important distinction, and I will elaborate later on why. But going back to ISMA report already mentioned, ISMA report from March 2022 highlighted the need that the more transparency on the market is required, and that there are institutions based in places far, far away from Europe, which are holding the allowances. I mean, in Australia, in Cayman Islands, and according to the report, these entities are responsible for 71% of gross position of funds category in EU derivatives, which is, we calculated that, 4% in all categories. It's more than all entities based in Italy. So I think it's obvious for all of us that these actors, without obligation to surrender allowances for factual emissions, are not driving the decarbonization in Europe and the European economy. The EU ETS, as one of the few carbon markets open to financial actors without any safeguards might become the source of windfall profits for financial institutions at cost of compliance entities actively contributing to reduce its emission while maintaining jobs, industrial productions, and reliable energy supply. And to illustrate this issue, I would like to share with you a chart presenting a correlation between investment funds and position and EU allowance prices. Oh, sorry. So now, if you don't mind, I'll share with you. Okay. Can you see the slide? Can you see the slide? I hope you can see the slide.
Yep.
Yes, great. So what this slide represents. Please focus on the red line and on the blue line. So maybe let's start with the blue line. The blue line is the line that represents the amount of allowances held by financial institutions, non-compliance entities. You can see that, for example, there's a small peak at the beginning of the year, and the red line represents the prices of allowances. So you can see that once the non-compliance entities decided to hold more allowances, the prices of allowances is getting higher. And you can see this throughout the years. It confirms our theory that it strongly affects the prices. At the same time, you can see the green line, sorry, which represents the number of allowances held by the compliance entities. You can see no correlations between prices. You can see that in March there is, you can see the number in March is lower because, of course, they are. This is the moment where when compliance entities are obliged to surrender the allowances. So with this chart, I can share with you this later on as well. Confirms that non-compliance entities, financial institutions, strongly affect the situation on the European market, and it's also going back to what you, Michael, said. It's very important to stress that financial intermediaries continue ensuring market liquidity and price discovery, but other financial institutions, like, I don't know, pension funds outside the EU, have only interest in holding CO2 allowances for the long term. So that means that they become unavailable for compliance entities for years, as strategic as these bodies often have a long life investment horizon. So for the same reason, excluding those actors will not undermine the carbon market liquidity. It's important to highlight that in the recent resolution on energy prices, the Parliament urged the Commission to eliminate the influence of the speculative capital on the EU ETS allowances market, which we are fully certain is there. So, but going back to the next issue, let's say, I would like to tackle, which is EU ETS reduction target and the MSR so the Commission and the Council proposal regarding the level of the ambition and the 61% reduction target for ETS sector against 63 proposed by the Parliament offers better prospects for a stable CO2 prices development and sustainable growth in Europe. The Parliament's complicated formula that introduced a higher CO2 target through complex rebasing and multiple increases of yearly reduction pace up until 2030, well, it's not even clear for the experienced market participant. And as such, it creates, well, great ground for excessive speculations from financial institutions. And what's more, the Parliament proposal for cancellation the allowances beyond 400 million EU allowances threshold effectively means that the EU ETS target is increased even further beyond this 63%. And that means that these allowances that go directly to the MSR will never return back to the market. And what's more, as the EU plans to front load some allowances at the same time for a recovery and resilience facility, maintaining at the same time the application of the MSR means that the supply will be extremely squeezed after 2026. So canceling allowances held in the MSR, the EU deprives itself resources that can be used in the future urgent needs. So by all of this, there is an increase of an excessive market carbon squeeze even before 2030. So, and it's a huge risk. We find it should be tackled and should be acknowledged first of all, and should be tackled in the next step. When it comes to modernization fund, just briefly, well, the number of allowances in the modernization fund is calculated as a percentage of the total number of allowances, and that states that the higher target, the lower the number of allowances, and by the extension, the ETS funding for energy transition is even more most vulnerable countries and regions. So the Parliament also proposed to increase the list of potential modernization fund beneficiaries further to neighboring regions in other than beneficiary countries. Modernization fund, is dedicated to close gap between poorer and richer countries in energy sector, and there are other instruments like structural funds that can address investments in cross-border development better. I think I don't have more time to say to present our position on district heating, so I will terminate here and wait for the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Wanda. I want to make sure that we have some opportunity for discussion and ask some questions. So I invite people that are on the in the audience to raise questions, and all of you that are in part of the discussion to actually participate and react to each other's. But my question is very simple. It's a long shopping list, whether it comes from you or from Nadia, Domin, they want more. Everybody wants something, but we are now in a situation that this is like, I don't know, 1 yard to go, 2 minutes and 1 yard to go in American football terms. So there's very little time, and these people, there's a bunch of people there that are, I don't know this negotiation. I've never been in a EU negotiation, but I've been in UNFCCC negotiations. When what we do at the last moment, we kind of focus on what's at hand. And we've heard all the arguments, and we focus on what's at hand, what's changeable, what's realistically changeable. So some of these ideas that were brought here are very, very significant and move the needle, move the discussion in very significant way from what we hear so far. So how realistic it is that somebody is going to make big changes at this point in the package that's out there, because it's a package, it's always a package. How realistic is it that that people haven't heard this argument? And if they have heard these arguments, because they have heard this argument, why are they not reacting to these arguments? Because to me it's incomprehensible. Either they don't believe them, or they say, well, tough luck, we got to do it because the environment tells us to do it, or what is it? Because if Nadia, you tell the politicians and live and that, man, I mean, you're not going to have your industry of a certain ilk in Europe. I mean, if you are a politician and you got to listen to this thing and you make rules. So what is happening? Why don't you get resonance of all this? That's what I'm trying to understand, because the picture that you're painting is dramatic, and the evidence is beginning to pop up on the screen, and yet it is not going through. Is there a reason for that, or what is it? Or are we being naive and listening too much to you? Liv.
I think it's too complex, and so many things happen at the same time, and they're only focusing on one thing. And I don't understand fully the consequences of industries shutting down. Some of them might drop up again, but many of them will not. And how can Europe survive not having industries that will then create income stream to Europe? And I think, why demanding more of industries in this time where you need industries more desperately than before? And what we have been seeing, saying with three of us from industries here, we are performing best in the world. So don't kill it and then being worse with regards to the global climate. I think we need someone to sit down and make an impact assessment of what is happening now in Europe with regards to industry shutdown and the carbon footprint of what is happening in Europe. Because nobody's providing this information. Because if they got this information, maybe they would change their attitudes.
But Domin, do you think that, I mean, look, we know each other quite well. We worked together for many years, and you contributed enormously where we are here now. But I mean, do you think that people are not listening to, haven't heard this argument? You guys have heard these arguments. I mean, do you don't believe them? Again, it's not trying to be negative or put you on the spot. It is simply, I'm puzzled because I don't understand what's happening. It's quite clear in my mind that a lot of these trains have left. What do you think, Domin? I mean, what's your view on this?
I have a lot of views on this, and obviously I'm not refuting any of the claims or evidence made by colleagues from industry, but we're also clearly convoluting an energy crisis with a climate crisis. I mean, you asked us to focus on the ETS, the revision of the ETS and the impacts thereof. I don't think, and Liv, correct me if I'm wrong, or Nadia, I don't think any of the recent shutdowns have anything to do with the ETS or compliance costs thereof, right? It is energy costs, it is electricity costs, it is fossil fuel reliance, right? So in that sense, basically tells us to some extent there are some failures in terms of market design, potentially. We haven't done enough in the past, which has made us susceptible to these kind of shocks and these kinds of crises. And I think we need to do more in order to be resilient in the future. In that, the ETS plays a vital role and is a sort of, it's almost a strategic asset of the EU to make sure that we will reduce our vulnerabilities in the future. Having said that, beyond that, we can have a discussion on basically the division of costs between society, industry, and taxpayers directly. And I think that's what we're doing.
Let's try and keep the answers short if it's possible. Nadia, I think the rational thing to do is, since they actually been mentioned by name, I think you gotta have the chance to answer. Let's try and keep it. But then I saw you, Liv, but I will answer that. I want to go to Michael and also hear from him what's going on. Nadia?
Yes, I think that, well, everything is intertwined, and when you are confronted with energy bill, and on top of that CO2 prices, this is the straw which breaks the camel's back as well. Of course, what has precipitated the whole thing is the energy prices, but when the measure envisaged by the decision makers is to say, if you want us to help you, you need to invest in addition. But if you are on the verge of closing your plan, you are not going to invest. You don't have even the money to run your plan and to pay the workers. So it cannot be ignored. This is the reality of a production plan. So that has to be taken into account. And a production plan cannot invest if it's at the verge of being in bankruptcy. It is as simple as that. And what we see today is exactly the opposite of the wish of the decision makers: increase of the global carbon footprint and increase of European dependency on critical raw materials. So it seems that the politic, how is it currently managed, doesn't work.
Andras, we have one person here that raised his hand, a courageous person. Andras, if you want to introduce yourself and try and keep it short if possible. I'm sorry, but it may be very persuasive, but we can't hear it. There's something I don't hear. Can you guys hear it? Because okay, so I'm not the only one. So it's something at your end, Andras. I'm sorry to say this. Well, look, what I'll do is try and figure out what's going on. No, we can't hear you. I'm terribly sorry. Michael, before I go back to Liv, let me, because you had the floor, and I need to also go to Michael if I can. I mean, what is, is this, having a what do you call that, an impact assessment in the middle of all this? I mean, is this realistic that somebody is going to say, wait a second, guys, let's stop the clock and we'll have another impact assessment? Can you do that?
Of course. When do you need it? In 5 days? Well, of course not. But let me just quickly comment on what Wanda said. So, Wanda, I'm going to reach out to you. Maybe we should have a more in-depth discussion on that. And I think you know my stance more broadly. But on the issue of, I mean, I somehow find myself ending up in many of these discussions these days, and I mean, being accused as a representative of the environmental advocacy coalition. So I'm just an observer and someone who analyzes things. And what I can say is, I mean, it's definitely clear that the industry is under pressure. The whole continent is under pressure. I mean, there's no denying that, of course. But my impression from the discussions is that there's a certain tendency to attribute all of this to climate policy. I mean, the major cause of this crisis is not coming from climate policy, it's coming from the East. And we all know the name of the guy. So what is, I mean, the residuum that's really putting the additional pressure on climate policy, that could be decisive. I admit that. It certainly depends on the cases, but it's not the lion's share. And taking your point, Liv, so what shall we do? Shall we give climate policy a break? I mean, we have to go on. And it's clear that this is a political process. It is a messy one. It's a chaotic one. And I think one needs to have, and this is my understanding of Peter Liese, observing him in this many talks he gives and his open thinking about it. And he's trying to find a balance. So everyone has to make some concessions. I think that's his point. And then he's trying to find the right balance. And so everyone is at the moment, I hope, trying to find the right balance. And we hope that eventually the people who are trying to find a balance are not to put too much effort or too much priority on one or the other goal, that they will prevail and that they will influence the outcome or be decisive for the outcome. So that's my take. And of course, it's a difficult situation. But you also have to look at, I mean, you also have to see, sorry if this comes across as cynic, but the positive side, I mean, in terms of pushing investments that are necessary, and also some things that are probably very much under the radar. For instance, the shift in using EUAs as collaterals now. So I think this could remove a lot of liquidity pressure from the industry. I don't know your situation, but in general, there are options and there are possibilities. I mean, to to create leeway and to create new options going forward. I mean, what this all means in detail is a very difficult discussion, but this is how I see it standing, and I think finding the right balance is important. It's a political process in nature, but we should not over-exaggerate in terms of the attribution.
Okay, well, Liv and then Wanda.
Well,
Let's try and keep it short, guys.
yeah, I'll be short. First of all, I'd like to come back to the impact assessment. We don't need a comprehensive impact assessment. We need just to estimate what the consequences of these industries are. We have figures from them of the previous year, what they contributed with regards to income to society, what is the lack of it now going forward. Then to the additional point, this means because the closing down and the deficit of these companies make them less, decreases possibilities for them to decarbonize, because we have this speed in Europe to decarbonize, and no other industries in the world are faced with this speed and doing their best as we are doing here. And that is a scenario we should look into. I don't say that I don't defend the ETS and an ETS and Green Deal target, but do not make it additional complicated and having too high operational costs in this phase. And what Wanda also said is one of the things I've been advocating for. Look at the MSR. There are volume there that you are canceling, which are there due to the good stuff, due to reductions. Why should you cancel them? Then you are doubling counting for making it worse for industries. So we need to make more flexibilities to not make us more vulnerable and not increasing the carbon footprint in Europe due to we're not able to set up regulation the right way. Thank you.
Wanda?
Well, then don't even know where to start, but going back to your initial question that you started with our discussion. Well, I think that for European high stakes, it's a moment it's a Napoleon moment, you know, to stop and think and, you know, have kind of reflection what they have done, whether that was whether they have undertaken a good measure and measures in the past, and what to do in the future. They you know, this is the moment when we have to admit, and I think this, you know, admit that maybe something was not doing haven't been done very well is always tough, but you know, we have to require responsibility for policymakers, and responsibility requires, you know, admitting if something went wrong and need to be adjusted for the future. The strategy that has been prepared for the past when it comes to climate policy need to be adjusted to nowadays reality. Now we know that, you know, it was not going back to impact assessment. It has been tackled several times during our discussion. You know, impact assessment for EU ETS predicted the average price for EU ETS allowance, like for 2022, 43 euros per ton. And you know, do we remember the price before the 23rd of February? It was doubled. It was doubled. So you know, this impact assessment, well, yeah, it's good to have one, but I can say that the impact assessment prepared for EU ETS was worth nothing, actually. And you know, building what Liv and Nadia said, you know, I'm wondering what's the current purpose of European Union, because you know, the origins of European coal and steel community, and then other, you know, well, we went through different phases, but you know, the origins of European Union was to increase competitiveness and to strengthen the industry across the Europe. And right now, from surprisingly, European Union is doing opposite to the industry, and it's not helpful. So what's the purpose nowadays of the European Union? My question is, you know, I know that we have to take care of the climate. okay, but you know, I can see that nowadays European Union takes care a lot about the climate, but doesn't take care at all about the industry. And we are alarming, all of us alarming. I think all of the branches that are suffering are alarming. But you know that probably the high stakes are not willing to hear us out. Why is that? So let me leave this question open for all of you.
Thanks, Randa. Andras, are you back? Can you now speak?
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much.
Just tell us who you are very quickly, and but let's try and make this quite rapid fire exchange.
Okay, I will try to be really clear. I'm Andras from Euroheat and Power, and we are representing district heating and cooling. I remember that Wanda was trying to speak more about district heating and cooling, so maybe this was the topic what she wanted to mention. We are concerned because in ETS 2, the Parliament introduced the distinction between private and commercial heating, creating an unfair situation between district heating consumers and private fossil fuel heating users. According to the Parliament text, the district heating and cooling would likely be introduced in the commercial heating and therefore be in the ETS 2 from 2025, while individual fossil fuels would not be covered, at least not before 2029. We understand the social aspects of this measure, of course, mainly during now the current energy prices. But with this distinction, we are making difference between heating of households and heating of households, other households, for at least 4 years. And the only difference is the source of the heat, not the fuel or the emission produced. So I would like to hear your opinion on this matter, maybe how it could be solved, because in our opinion the only solution would be to delay the introduction of ETS 2 because we can't predict what the energy prices will be in the coming years.
Okay, well, let me go to either Domin or Michael. Do you guys want to tackle this at all? Because I think the other, maybe Wanda will have an opinion on this, but let me go first to these two guys because I've heard less from them. No, nothing's okay. But then Wanda, can I come back to you?
Well, I would love to, but I have a lot of difficulties with
hearing.
Yeah.
It
Sorry,
was. Yeah. It was. I agree with you. I was hoping that it's me only, but it looks like it wasn't me only. So Andras, I'm afraid that a lot of your intervention seems to have been challenging for the others to listen. But it was obviously about district heating that I think that you're talking about, and can you make the short question just to make sure that I don't denaturate it?
The distinction between the introduction of individual and commercial district heating, because district heating goes into the commercial part, but the private fossil fuel heating won't be covered in ETS 2 until 2029. So there will be 4 years of difference, and this will place the heat consumers in not a level playing field.
Okay, I think people are still having some difficulty. Let me go to maybe you want to put it in chat, Andras, that way people can maybe make clear that they hear it. I'm sorry, there's not much I can do about it. Maybe you put it in the chat and that way they can react to it. Michael, you go. I don't think it's district heating you want to talk about. It's probably something else.
It's a little bit related. I mean, I think it's actually a broader problem. I mean, if I understood the comment right, so we do have a boundary line that is problematic. So I think this is what Andras had wanted to say. So that we had some parts of district heating in the ETS and some parts excluded. And we will have this for other sectors too. I mean, we know this from the German system, where we went over a lot of pain to have everything that's non-ETS in the system, and literally everything. And there are some things will even be left out with the new ETS. So we have the typical boundary problems and the consequences coming with it. But I think this is, I mean, this is all I can say. I can basically echo that this is problematic, but cannot and do not want to go into the details of this meeting.
Well, listen, let's now, I'm looking at my clock here, and we try to be, since it's late in the day for some people, we'll try to make a last round and comments. But again, I continue to be a broken record and say, well, listen, yes, we know this is a real concern, but what is realistic to happen now? Because we are now we are getting in a situation where these people are seeing their fine tuning, and some of you are talking about very fundamental things. And I'm not against fundamental things. Sometimes I think that the fundamentals are wrong, but you know, so what do we do now, guys? Because I think you're going to be faced with something that obviously is not listening to these arguments. Nadia, you start first. I don't know what happened to Liv, but Nadia, you start first.
Well, I'm not a magician, but as I said at the beginning, from the side of the industry, there is an urgent need to be helped, especially when the European industry is confronted with unfair competition with third countries. So there is an urgent need to intervene concerning the energy bill. And we need, especially for electro-intensive industry, to have a low carbon and affordable energy to continue to operate. Otherwise, we won't be able to. So now that's the urgent measure. Then there are more long-term measures. But we are, of course, we support the decarbonization progress and the climate objective. But if I would transpose the situation of the industry into a family, imagine a family queuing to have a social head, and then at the door of the office, the people are telling them, look, you can have the money if you completely renew your house. Doesn't make sense. There are contexts, and we need to take that into account. If we want to have the industry still operate in Europe and not increase the carbon footprint in Europe.
I mean, what was going to happen? I mean, what's your prediction?
My prediction. I don't think I'm as optimistic as Jan about finalizing this by the end of the year. It wouldn't surprise me if this runs into next year. Having said that, I also don't think differences between the council and parliament position are that big. It just feels like neither of them have a mandate to wiggle in between those two positions. But as I said before, I think ambition, pretty clear what the target is going to be. MSR, they're pretty much aligned. And now, aside for thresholds, there are some questions about how money is being spent, but that is always a different view between council and parliament. And in the end, the council tends to win out. And then there are a few more, I guess, specialty cases, such as conditionality for pre-allocation, what to do with that. There seems to be quite a different philosophy between parliament and the council, same with the bonus-malus system. But in the end, I think probably the moment you get political traction on this, I think the political level is busy with other stuff right now, to some extent, maybe understandably so. But I think once you get the political weight behind it, it doesn't seem to be like positions are too far apart from one another.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, these people are kind of looking at brackets, and some of you are talking about fundamental things. So I'm not quite sure. You know, there seems to be a discontinuity between what I think politicians are doing at this stage and what people are clamoring for. Liv, let's try and keep it.
Yeah, I only have one wish, and that don't push this process. because Europe need to rethink the consequences for industries going forward, because this can last for many, many, many years. So we have the European Green Deal, but it can be carried out in different ways, and do it in a way so protecting industries as good as one can in this situation. Thank you.
Okay. Who do we have left? Wanda, and then Michael.
Okay, so yeah, I think I agree with you, unfortunately, Andre, that it's that I don't have high hopes for European high stakes to, you know, this to rethink the fundaments of the policy. I would love to have that, but when it comes to to more specific things, what I assume that are doable, well, I think that the position of the position of the Parliament to change the multiplier number is probable to be implemented. To 2 probably is possible. I would love to have even lower multiplier number. And also the council position on that as well. I mean, the automatic release of allowances. I've talked with a lot of with many functionaries and European policymakers, and I've heard a lot of understanding about this issue. That, you know, from that for years there was a need to Article 29A to be activated, but it was not functioning well and well drafted. So it should be improved. When it comes to EU ETS reduction target and MSR, I have a lot of concern about that, because I see the tendency and this, you know, this this willingness to strengthen and to push the industry, to strengthen the target and to push the industry even more. I don't know. I don't understand the reason. I think it's highly detrimental, and I hope it won't happen and they will turn back from this way. But I don't know how it's going to end. Modernization Fund, we will do our best to persuade, to explain our policymakers that it's not the right way as well, but I cannot predict that.
Michael, and then what I'll ask, Jan, you're still here. I looked you up and you're still here. I just want to, you know, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but just your reaction. I mean, you know, is it, as I said, is it a bunch of people talking about some very fundamental things? Well, you know, I'm not in a negotiation. People are going to talking about, as Domin said, that, you know, there's no big differences. So is there somebody going to come on a white horse and change everything? Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I like to bring up one point which I think is important and has been forgotten in the discussion. So as politicians are reacting, but just not on the EU level. They are reacting on the national level, and these reactions are immense if you compare the figures. And so we need to bring this into the equation, I think, to have a fair assessment of things. The point that from my point of view is the issue that's really critical is that we do not end up in a situation where we do not have a level playing field anymore, because there's a big risk of a race to the bottom. I mean, to shielding the national industry. And so I think if there is indeed a good case for an impact assessment, as you mentioned, then it would be to have an impact assessment on how to maintain the level playing field in the current situation.
Well, look, Jan, I know you and Pavel are you know, you are in a delicate situation. The Czech Republic has had views in the past. Now it's in a different situation. You would like to wrap it up under your presidency. I think many people would like to see it wrapped up before Christmas or, you know, before New Year. But do you take anything? I mean, any of this realistic to make into the final round of discussion? I know you'll say everything, people will listen to everything, but is how realistic is this whole thing? Or we're really talking at the edges when people are talking about fundamentals?
I'm sorry, I've had a lot of emotions here in this seminar. For one moment, I was thinking, how is this seminar called? Whether it is a seminar on the energy crisis and soaring electricity prices and impacts of Russian invasion, or whether it is focused on ETS revision for phase 4. I completely understand the emotions, because when somebody sees his or her business or the whole sector endangered by soaring energy prices, it must be very tough. I can understand that, but why then discussing that on the seminar on ETS revision? There is plenty of platforms and almost continuous discussion on how to deal with the gas prices, which is pushing the price of electricity up, and we are all dealing with that. It's not only the industry; it's the households also, and all there isn't one European member state which would be not dealing with that 24/7. And there is almost continuous discussion on the EU level on how to tackle this threat, because this is not something one member state could do, solve single-handedly. And that's why the European Union was created, right? To handle problems that are too big for one national country, but which needs to be tackled by cooperation of the member states. This has almost nothing to do with the ETS revision and with the carbon price. Some of the arguments I heard here, I've been hearing since I started at the ministry, regardless on the price of allowance. Some of these arguments have been here since the price of allowance around 12 or 15 euro, and the arguments have been still the same. I'm not saying this to play down the concerns of the industry, because the price again, the prices of electricity and energy are extreme, but I would rather think that ETS and instruments and financial instruments and systems of motivation and incentives work towards the works towards the solution. The Czech Republic alone is installing 600 megawatts or 1 gigawatt peak of photovoltaics per year, thanks to the modernization fund and the emission allowances. That is rather way out, rather than part of the problem. Also, we all know that Fit for 55 and the revision of the ETS directive for phase 4 is not the end of line, right? There will be another revision for phase 5, another revision for another phase, because there must be additional measures if the European Union is to achieve the climate neutrality by 2050. So I also heard the argument that the emission allowance has some volatility. that's understandable because it is traded on a daily basis. So the volatility is similar to other energy commodities, but also the allowance gives quite a good perspective for next phases, not only for this one, because we don't know how the final compromise of Fit for 55 will look like. But there is a clear perspective for phase 5 and for subsequent phases, because the perspective is that the ETS will go towards the climate neutrality, and all the measures and instruments that are connected with it will play along. So with this clear perspective, I think it's easier to make investment decisions. But it is not going to solve the current energy crisis. That is different story.
Well, I can tell you one thing, Jan. I'm not sure about what these people are saying. They seem to be somewhat speechless, but I can tell you that you'll make the headlines tomorrow. That I can guarantee you. So look, I didn't expect anything less from the Czech presidency, except I don't know Czechia that well, but I know enough to know that you're straight speakers, both you and Pavel. I'm not gonna go to the others to respond because I think that we will get into the same discussion, but I think we've heard different views. I think you've expressed what is probably a unspoken sense of what's happening right now. So if anybody wants to change minds, hearts and minds at this point, it's going to have to fight this, again, this perception, which I sensed as well, because Domin says these people are acting, I think any negotiation at this point are acting at the edges and discussing certain elements while others are fixed. While there are some concerns which are very fundamental, and some of them may be unrelated to ETS, maybe unrelated to climate policy, but maybe some of them are quite related to climate policy. But again, I'm not, and we're not making the policy, we try to express views for policymakers to account for them. And some of them are being heard and some of them not being heard, and God help us, we hope that we get it right. It is a giant poker hand that we're playing with EU future, and we're all hoping some of us are older, some of us are younger. And we hope that what we leave behind is a prosperous Europe. I hope we're united in that. I will stop here, but thanks to Jan for this very articulate and clear vision. Whether everybody liked it or not, it's a different story. Thanks to Wanda and to Liv and to Nadia, Michael and Domin, but also Juan Lopez that has put this whole thing together and that is sitting with me. And again, it's our contribution to what we think brings some clarity to the discussion and ideas to be heard. If nothing else, I think you can accuse anything of today, but I think that it's brought some clarity on vision. And for those of you that want to change that, you guys have a heck of a job ahead of you. So again, thank you very much. Some of us will be going to the COP. So you guys can deal with the ETS. I'm going to have to deal with Article 6, loss and damage, response measures. I mean, you name it, I've got it. So Jan, I'm not sure you're going there or not. I know Pavel will. But thank you again very much to all of you, and God help us all. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye, all of you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.